Where does real wisdom come from? To me, that's a pretty interesting question. I think most people, when you ask them, they would say, well, it comes from this book that I read. It comes from this spiritual teacher. It comes from this audio program, or it comes from this workshop that I attended. But really, none of those is the right answer. Real wisdom doesn't come from these outside sources the way it seems to. If you just take the example of, well, it came from this spiritual teacher. Well, then they must have learned from another spiritual teacher before that, and from before that. Where did it ultimately come from? Was there one principal teacher who showed up and started it all? No. The answer is much more profound, much more beautiful, and that's what we're going to look at coming up next. Well, I guess we could begin this journey looking at the much coveted aha moment. You've all had it. Aha! You're reading the book, you're attending the workshop, you're listening to a video on YouTube, and there's this moment of insight, this moment of real wisdom. And for all intents and purposes, it seems as though, well, I was just reading this book, and that's where I had the aha. And so, of course, it came from this author. It came from this spiritual teacher. It came from the group exercise at this workshop. But that isn't really what happens. See, let's just take the example of a spiritual book. So if you're watching this video, which you are, there's a good chance that you've read a spiritual book before watching this video at some point in your life. Self-improvement book, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter. It could be any book where you had this aha moment of realization. If you look at what's happening there, it seems like I'm reading these words in the book, and that author's knowledge and understanding is coming into me. And so at a particular point, all those ideas of the authors align in such a way, and I have an aha moment. Well, that's partly true. Here, let's take a look at this illustration. When I read a spiritual book, when I listen to a spiritual teacher, I attend a workshop, in this case, reading a spiritual book, what's actually happening is that book is clearing away certain misunderstandings. It's by making something very, very clear. It is giving me a direct line of sight to something. It's actually shining a light upon a pre-existing relationship in my understanding. And when the clarity is sufficient, there is this sudden spark of insight. Aha, I see it. But it hasn't come into you from those words that you read. The insight that you experience, the revelation, that new piece of wisdom, is something that was already within you. And the author's words, their sentences, their ideas, all they do is they get you looking this way, then a little bit this way, a little bit down. They point your chin this way, point over there. That's all they can do. The example always comes to mind for me of a ballet teacher. You know, the ballet teacher tells the student, hold your arm this way, make your torso like this, bring your head over here, bring the other arm out here. And what the teacher is doing is getting that student's body in alignment with the principles of dance, so that if that student gets the positioning just right, there'll be a flash, a moment of real balance, a moment of perfect execution. And that's the moment where the teaching takes place. But it's not a teaching that's coming from the instructor. The teaching is between that student and dance itself. You could look at it in a slightly different way, and you could say that within you, within me, within each of us, there is the student, there's the teaching, and there's the teacher. The student, we'll say it in a different arrangement: the student, the teacher, and the teaching. Like this. You are all three of these. You are the student, you are the teacher, and you are the teaching that is taught from the teacher to the student. Now, it's an interesting idea. There's an element of beauty in it, but is it true? Well, take any one of those aha moments and study it, as in all of these ideas, in all real spiritual teachings. We always have to take our direct experience and examine it. And if we can't corroborate what's being said through our own direct experience, we have to throw it out, at least temporarily, put it on the back burner, let it simmer for a while. So let's take this and look at it. I am the student, I'm the teacher, and I'm the teaching. Well, in that moment of the aha, it's pretty apparent that you are the student, right? I mean, I'm the one who was in need of information. I was the one who was looking for insight, looking for understanding. Definitely, I can see I'm definitely the student. I can see the students there. Well, in that moment of aha, if I can see that, yes, the teacher's idea, the author's ideas in that book are instrumental. They're important, just like the ballet teacher. That author's ideas are positioning me, positioning my spiritual body in a certain way so that I have a direct line of sight, a direct sign of light, in a direct line of sight into some relationship that I hadn't seen before. But in that moment of aha, suddenly all sorts of things that previously had been clouded over, things that I couldn't see, the cloud, the veil, it's cleared away, and there's an instant perception. So there's a teaching that takes place in that moment. And the teacher, so the teaching is what's understood. And now, what about the teacher? I can see I'm the student. I can see that the teaching certainly takes place right where I'm standing. I go from being unable to see to being able to see. And so, yes, absolutely, a teaching took place right here in the center of myself. Now, what was the teacher? Now, this is where it gets subtle. It wasn't me actively teaching myself in the way that I know myself as the student. I can really feel myself as the student, the one in need. I need something to help this relationship. I need something to help my understanding. So I can feel myself definitely as the student. But the teacher is a presence also within me, just like the teaching takes place within me, the teacher, this light that can see, this perception that is able to make sense of things, that's within me as well. It's not the author's perception that is suddenly seeing these relationships. It's the perception within me, the intuition within me. So all three of them are within me all at once. The student, the teacher, and the subject that's being taught. I'm the subject that's being taught as well. So we called it the teaching before. We said the teaching takes place within me. But I'm the subject matter also. The subject matter isn't really coming into me from that author's words, from that spiritual teacher's instruction. I myself am the subject matter. I am both the misunderstanding and the understanding. I'm the confused relationship, and I am the purified relationship, the truth. The whole thing is right there at the center of myself. In any given moment of realization, call it the aha moment, all three of these are active at once within me. There's a need. You can call that the student. There's the teacher, this perception, this awareness, this ability to see into things. That's within me. And then there's the teaching that takes place and the subject matter that's being taught. And so truly, a spiritual teacher, spiritual author, they are facilitators. But ultimately, the real teaching happens in the individual, between himself, herself, and the life with a capital L that gave that individual their life. See, this puts authors and experts and spiritual teachers and teachings on a completely different level. It puts them in their proper place. Because ultimately it's a holy teaching, a whole teaching, whether you want to use the word W-H-O-L-E or H-O-L-Y. It is a whole teaching between this potential called Tim, the potential called you, and the life that gave me this life. And you can call that whatever you want. You can call that God, call it the universe. Don't break it up into anything. Call it the whole. Now, with this understanding, you can make use of this spiritual teaching, that religious tradition, these insights from this book or mystic or anybody else, because ultimately they're brought in as merely reference material in this inner classroom. But the real true teacher will use them. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this whole relationship of you are the student, the teacher, and the teaching. Share with us your insights, what you see about it, down in the comments. And then we'll take up the next lessons that come to us as we go along.